Good morning to everyone joining us from Germany, and good afternoon to our participants also in China. Welcome to today's webinar on the new regulations governing network data security management. So, as you know, over the past months, China has significantly tightened its legal framework in this area. With the new 15th five-year plan and the new reporting obligations for cybersecurity incidents, the topic is becoming even more important for international companies operating in China. And here's a little bit introduction. My name is Chang Luo. I am a legal consultant at China Brand Consulting. Joining me today is my colleague Xinyu Chen, who is also a legal consultant. We both specialize in IT compliance and data security projects in China. So, cybersecurity is being elevated to a strategic and political level in China's new 15th five-year plan. Network data is now viewed as a strategic resource linked directly to national security. This means that data management is no longer just an IT matter. It has become a management and broad level issue. So, as you can see, the legal basis of today's webinar consists mainly of the network data security management regulations and the new national measures for the management of security incident reporting. Both regulations significantly tighten requirements for network security because cyber attacks are becoming more frequent and more severe. The new regulations are ushering in a new paradigm in data management. China is shifting from data protection to comprehensive data governance. This elevates the role of the IT department. We are seeing a shift in China from growth to resilience. This is also reflected in Chinese policy, which is no longer focused solely on growth but on resilience. Growth now takes a backseat to security. Security comes before growth. China wants to remain technologically sovereign and has put the economy on the back burner. This has implications for businesses. In China, we can no longer focus solely on revenue, market share, and growth. We must focus on resilience in accordance with the law. This is a very important shift that we must keep in mind. As part of this shift, data is viewed differently in China. It is now an integral part of industrial policy and supply chain stability, and indeed of the AI and innovation strategy. In China, virtually everything currently revolves around artificial intelligence, which is intended to provide the economy with new productive forces and elevate it to a significantly higher level. The consequence is that data management is becoming part of China's strategy and is no longer merely an IT issue. Responsibility for data is shifting from the IT department to the executive level, that is, to management. CEOs and board members are more directly affected. They are slowly but surely assuming greater liability. We are seeing this in our projects. CEOs are increasingly attending IT meetings. The network data security management regulations, as you can see on the screen, are an operational tool of the 15th five-year plan. This means that China, the central government, is using these regulations to put its strategic plans into practice. This means that the NDSMR operationalized the political goals of the 15th five-year plan and expands the definition of data. It now covers all the network data, not just personal data. Until now, personal data has played the largest role in compliance projects against the backdrop of the Personal Information Protection Law, as known as PIPL. That is no longer the case. The focus is now on all data relevant to the stability of the economy. So, to implement this, China is now introducing stricter categories. When it comes to important data, the definition was always a bit vague. There was always the question, like, what exactly constitutes important data? Does it even concern us? We now have heightened requirements. Everything is becoming much more precise and much more stricter. And what's new is that in some cases, the laws have extraterritorial effect. The extraterritorial aspect used to be in the background. It didn't really play a major role in our projects in practice. That's now coming to the fore. So now, as you can see, there is a paradigm shift underway in data management. We are now moving from data protection to comprehensive data governance. This implies a holistic view of the situation and a comprehensive, integrated approach to our projects. We are shifting from purely IT-based processes to management and governance processes. Projects are becoming interdisciplinary. interdisciplinary. The demands on company are changing now. We are under pressure to conduct risk assessments, implement governance structures, and restrict data transfers. Cross-border data transfer, too, has always happened somewhat on the side or in the background. It wasn't a major issue, but with the new data paradigm, it is now gaining prominence. It is simply becoming more relevant. This extraterritorial effect is now becoming more evident, like, for example, in the new regulation A34 and A35, which stipulate that supply chains may no longer be interrupted or replaced for geopolitical reasons. This means that foreign companies in China must, under no circumstances, allow geopolitically relevant EU or US requirements to result in, for example, a shift to Vietnam. The Chinese legislature views this as a disruption to the Chinese economy and imposes very strict sanctions. It is not just about protection, but also about the classification of data. We have a context dependence on sectors, technologies, and supply chains. So this is Beijing's new control logic. Data is now evaluated politically, not just technically and legally. The entire system of network data is subject to politicization. IT compliance is being politicized. There is currently a renewed focus on the issue of network security. This stems from the debate surrounding the capabilities of the US AI system Claude Mythos. Claude Mythos is highly effective at detecting vulnerabilities in IT systems. This is currently causing a great deal of concern worldwide. For example, China is responding accordingly and tightening its regulations. We anticipate that Claude Mythos will lead to a further tightening of due diligence requirements. In addition to these stricter requirements, the network security system is now being expanded to include AI. AI is also used to detect and defend against cyber attacks in existing networks. And anyone who operates networks in China, for example, in connection with their customers, is considered a network operator. There is more government oversight and stricter liability. Risk controls are becoming increasingly AI specific, and network security as a whole is being operationalized and more strongly. On top of that, China is increasingly threatening to take extraterritorial measures if Beijing believes that foreign AI models are endangering Chinese networks. This is a new development. The Chinese are currently responding in the same way as the EU by taking a stricter approach. In Europe, the European Union authorities are conducting audits across the continents to monitor compliance with the GDPR's transparency requirements. Auditors are visiting companies to verify whether they are meeting those transparency requirements. China is now doing the same. There are new joint special campaigns by various authorities that are joining forces for these sanctions. They are conducting compliance audits with the focus always on the protection of personal data. To this end, there is a new national standard for data security technology that includes requirements for compliance audits regarding the protection of personal data. And it is interesting to note that they are now also checking whether previous outdated or non-compliant measures have since been updated or rectified. This is done through investigations, subpoenas, and enforcement actions against companies that have failed to adequately address issues. This means that if they were inspected or audited in the past, it is very likely that they will now be re-examined by authorities. These inspections tend to come as a relative surprise. So, how does this affect Western companies in China? We now urgently need a China localized data architecture. This is a standard topic here at China Brand. Naturally, clients try to keep their data in Germany or Europe for security reasons. However, China is pushing for and enforcing the localization of data architecture, like supply chain data, production and lot data, as well as AI training data, are subject to stricter controls. The Chinese government is therefore keeping a very close eye on everything related to AI, supply chains, production, and training. There are now also very high requirements for data sharing with partners. A key term here is third-party risk management. And the authorities are also taking a closer look at intra-group transfers. When integrating suppliers, we must also incorporate the process of data risk management. And here is a note on this. Always design risk management as a dynamic risk management. The magnitude of potential losses from risks will not change significantly, but the probabilities for occurrence will shift if there is yet another change in the geopolitical landscape. That happens every day around the world, as you know. So the probabilities of incidents occurring change abruptly. And with that, the present value of the risk as the product of probability and loss amount changes very quickly as well. This is not taken into account enough. Companies rely too heavily on static risk management. They calculate a risk, but the world looks completely different after just a few weeks. We need to develop a China-specific data governance model for companies and document it, preferably in both Chinese and English, in a manner that stands up to audit scrutiny. So how do we proceed? We usually start with a data inventory and data classification, known as data mapping. Then we conduct a data flow analysis. Both of these form the basis for a gap analysis and for risk and transfer assessments. So now, my colleague Xinyu will now go to more detail and show what this looks like in practice.
Thanks, Chang. Okay, let's talk about the regulation. And I don't intend to explain every single section of the law in detail. And what matters is the overall context. China is increasingly treating network security and data security as an ongoing management task. For companies, this means it is not enough to simply document compliance once. They must be able to continuously manage like process, responsibility, data flows, and evidence. The central starting point is the Network Data Security Management Regulations, or NDSMR for short. They have been in effect since January 1st, 2025. This shifts the focus from compliance documentation to continuous governance. In addition, the cybersecurity law will expire, and the amended one has took effect on January 1st, 2026. At the same time, several areas will be subjected to significantly stricter oversight. Cross-border data transfers, AI and generative AI systems, AI-generated content labeling, facial recognition, biometric data, data protection, compliance audits, and the reporting of security incidents. As you can see, the regulation does not only concern IT security in the narrow sense. It combines data protection, AI, data flow audits, and incident reporting into a single compliance issue. Under the NDSMR, the multi-level protection scheme remains the central security framework for networks and information systems in China. Systems are classified by protection level and must be secured accordingly through technical and organizational measures. This figure shows part of our checklist as a starting point for the preliminary assessment of the security level of IT system. This checklist was developed for us based on currently applicable Chinese laws, regulatory requirements, and national standards. It helps us systematically identify the company's IT system relevant to China. Only systems expected to be classified and the security level 2 or higher are subsequently transferred to actual MLPS registration process. External expert and relevant authorities are involved during the registration phase. Therefore, the security classification can theoretically still be adjusted. However, our project experience to date has shown that our preliminary classification regularly aligns with the subsequent expert assessment, and a government certified testing center reviewed the IT security measures. If gaps are identified, they must be analyzed or addressed. This was followed by a second review by an authorized testing body, and finally, an inspection by the police department. Another key point is the data inventory. The NDSMR requires classified and protection of network data. This particularly applies to critical data that might affect the national security, the public interest, or the rights of individuals or organizations. This diagram shows that this is not limited to personal data. Non-personal data can also be relevant. And this example distinguishes between corporate data, B2B consumer data, B2C user data, and another data. Additionally, categories such as national strategic data, data from critical infrastructure, and cybersecurity data are queried. And what does this mean for companies? First, it must be clear what data is actually available. Next, it must be determined whether this data is personal, sensitive, non-personal, or potentially classified as critical data. We have always used this checklist for our clients. This checklist is very helpful in this regard. To systematically collect data, identify risk in the areas of critical data, cybersecurity, and the supply chains subject to export controls, and prepare a preliminary review for reporting, localization, and cross-border data transfers. Cybersecurity in-state reporting is very important. There's also a very recent new law in China. Then, of course, after the party congress in the spring of 2026, the law will be a hot topic. When it comes to cybersecurity in state reporting, two levels must be distinguished. On the one hand, the NDSMR attaches certain obligations to important data, in particular notification, regular risk assessment, and reporting. On the other hand, there's a separate reporting system for cybersecurity incidents. This figure shows an example of how such incidents are classified. It distinguishes between particularly serious, significant, and general incidents. This classification depends on the impact of the incident. For example, whether networks go down, services are interrupted, or significant societal damage could result. The example also lists typical scenarios such as malware-induced network disruption. This classification logic is only developed in an emergency. It must be incorporated into internal process beforehand. Our checklist supports exactly that. It helps with severity classification, comparing specific scenarios and faster internal escalation response planning and deciding whether to report to authorities. The next step involves AI-related obligation. For provider-generated AI services, the regulation requires enhanced security management regarding training data and processing activities. In addition, effective measures must be in place to prevent and assess data security risks. Internally, we have developed this checklist as shown in the figure below. This figure clearly illustrates which questions are relevant in practice. For example, it addresses whether prompts, uploads, outputs, embeddings, or other user data from China are used for training, fine-tuning, service improvement, or safety monitoring. It also asks where this data is stored and processed. For instance, in mainland China, Germany, the US, or in cloud environments, third-party providers and cloud components such as Microsoft 365, Microsoft Azure, or Azure may also be relevant. This demonstrates that AI is not just about the model itself. What matters are the data flows, storage locations, purpose of use, and involved service providers. Our checklist therefore evaluates AI obligation regarding provision, use, access, model usage, and specific service scenarios. It captures AI data flows and derives follow-up measures. For example, for reporting, content governance, border crossing, data transfer, and incident response, we know that AI systems are also built in this way, just like IT system. We developed our checklist based on our IT systems checklist, as well as current AI regulations in China. After establishing the regulatory framework, the next step is the situation analysis. This involves conducting a realistic assessment of the company's current status on a technical level. This begins with an evaluation of products and systems. If source code is available, it should be examined for security vulnerabilities, hidden functions, or potential backdoors. Additionally, functional tests are advisable. The product is installed in a controlled environment and tested to ensure it functions properly and meets security standards. Penetration tests can also be conducted to simulate attacks and assess the product's resilience. This is followed by network traffic analysis. We verify whether unauthorized data transfers, are occurring and whether communication protocol meets security requirements. Finally, security and reliability must be ensured throughout the entire life cycle. The central question is whether the product can be operated securely and stably in the long term. This slide shows a table of organizational countermeasures. The table makes it clear that this is not just about the technical security. Companies must also demonstrate effective governance. This includes clear security responsibilities, a security policy, a management system, a security system, risk control, and audit mechanisms. Training the protection of individual rights and qualified personnel. Documentary evidence is particularly important. The table lists, for example, a personal information security management system, an information security incident management system, an emergency management system, audit documentation, and training record. In addition, the table distinguishes between the data exporter and the data recipient. This is very important for cross-border data flows. Both parts must be aware of their obligations and both must be able to document the measures they have taken. This slide complements the organizational perspective with technical security measures. And it covers the network environment, network security protocols, broader protection monitoring, antivirus measures, security checks, security certification, and data security monitoring. In practice, this means that companies must be able to demonstrate how their network is protected. Let's think about are there firewalls in place? Are vulnerability regularly assessed? Are there monitoring or EDA solutions? Are external connections monitored? Are data sources identified and documented? The table also shows that where existing Western tools may be technically useful, for China, it's necessary to additionally verify whether they are regularly compliant and whether they align with local requirements, such as the level of protection system. The situational analysis is followed by a business analysis at the organizational level. The existing structure are examined and any remaining gaps are identified. Companies must define clear responsibilities for data security management and designate a responsible person, for example, at the executive level or as a chief data officer. In addition, data risks must be assessed regularly, for instance, through internal audits. Action plans are required for identified risks. Another key point is data classification or labeling. Data should be classified according to sensitivity or protection requirements, for example, as confidential, important, or public. Special protective measures are required for sensitive and important data. Another issue is data localization. Important data must be stored or processed in China. Cross-border transfers are only permitted under specific regulatory conditions. In addition, contingency plans, training, external audits, and reports for regulatory authorities must be prepared. At the technical level, the gap analysis focuses on specific security controls. This includes firewalls, intrusion detection system, access controls, logging, and the real-time monitoring of data activities. Companies must also provide technical support for contingency plans so that data-related incidents can be detected and reported in a timely manner. Systems for access protection, data encryption, and Anomaly monitoring are also important. Regular updates and security patches are part of this as well. These measures also include typical tools such as identity and access management, vulnerability scanners like Nasus, SIEM system like Splunk, IDS and IP system like Snort, as well as IDA solutions like CrowdStrike, FedCo. AI-powered tools can also be used. However, it's not just a matter of which tools are available. What matters is whether they are embedded in a robust process and whether they met Chinese requirements. The new reporting requirements for cyber incidents call for speed and clear procedures above all else. Companies must establish and streamline mandatory reporting process. This requires an incident response process with clear decision-making pathways. Depending on the incident, reporting must be ensured within 1 to 4 hours. Therefore, a reporting channel or escalation mechanism that is available around the clock is necessary. Second, the classification of incidents must be operationalized. Companies need a system that allows incidents to be immediately classified as normal, serious, or practically serious. The Chinese classification logic should be integrated into existing IT security process. IT and compliance team must be trained to make quick and confident decisions in the event of an incident. This slide addresses the Chinese adoption of reporting structures. Companies must clearly determine which local, provincial, and national authorities in China are responsible for the receiving reports. In addition, standardized reporting templates should be developed that comply with regulatory requirements. The ability to submit follow-up reports is also important. If new information becomes available after the initial report, the company must be able to communicate this in a structured manner. The second point concerns external service providers. IT, cloud, and security service providers must be contractually obliged to report incidents immediately. Existing contracts, particularly those containing security clauses, should be adapted to meet Chinese requirements. In summary, this means that incident reporting is not merely a technical task. It involves collaboration between IT, compliance management, local units, the trading division, and external service providers. My colleague Chang will now discuss the remaining aspects.
Thank you very much, Xinyu. That was a lot of information. So here is the new question. How do we implement this in China? The legal requirements are now clear, but the question is how they are put into practice. So the first question is, what is the current state of affairs within the company? There are usually significant shortcomings. It's often done on an ad hoc basis. You might have a bit of firewall here and there and so on, but that's not enough. It doesn't meet legal requirements. The standard toolkit includes data mapping and data flow analysis using highly detailed, sophisticated questionnaires. The questions are based on years of project experience. It's quite comprehensive. We can do this online. We don't have to go to China for it. The result of a gap analysis is that we identify these risks and shortcomings in the existing ASMS system if one is in place. We can then assess the security strategy based on the current situation. Measures are already becoming apparent. They aren't yet concrete recommendations, but they are emerging. Then we move on to improvements. where we selectively enhance the information and security management system within the organization. It actually never needs to be completely reintroduced. Components are already in place. They just need to be updated and reinforced. The effort involved isn't that great. And last but not least, certification and archiving of our networks. This is very important in case of audits, so that we can actually demonstrate, okay, we've done this in both English and Chinese. So now you can see operational implementation. These are clearly structural measures aimed at realigning the existing overall system. As I mentioned before, the necessary components are usually already in place. They just need to be reorganized. Responsibilities are crucial. Often, no one is in charge or feels responsible. No one wants to take responsibility for the entire cybersecurity effort. So people tend to steer clear of the team and the issue altogether. You should set up a team responsible for this and expand reporting capabilities. This includes templates, initial reports, analysis, attack indicators, and so on. Simply analyze everything within a project and document it very clearly, and in detail, presenting the whole thing in an audit-proof manner. Then there are technical and organizational aspects that need to be strengthened. We have monitoring and detection system ways, and this is important. Real-time alerts. You have to be very, very fast in China, and we all know that. So here too is the often cited China space. In China, everything moves extremely fast. You can wait 2 or 3 weeks to report anything to the authorities, like here in Germany. The authorities won't accept that. You should be able to analyze attacks and identify vulnerability vectors and be able to demonstrate this analytical capability when not. You need to be able to address specific scenarios, which are usually the case. For example, ransomware attacks. But fortunately, we don't have a wide range of those. The types of attacks are often very company specific, industry specific, and tend to repeat themselves. And of course, manage the liability risks. So as I said, within the entire organizational structure, no one really wants to be deal with this issue for fear of taking on personal risk. No one wants to be held liable here. Liability is a major issue. Conducting regular audits of the processes, both those already implemented and those have been redesigned, can be done relatively quickly. Once the system is set up, you can review it once a year or so. It's very quick. It doesn't require much work. You should conduct simulated emergency drills for China-specific scenarios. So all of these structures, processes, and measures must now be integrated into international organization. The emphasis here is on international. We often see significant discrepancies and frequently even tensions between the European or American headquarters and the Chinese branch or subsidiaries. They are drifting further and further apart due to geopolitically driven decoupling. As consultants, we are right in the middle and must serve as a bridge. Often there is no group DPO or CDO, and a compliance manager is usually only found at headquarters. There is someone in charge of data and IT who handles this on the side. A dedicated China business unit is rare. A managing director or division head responsible for China is usually present. So what do we do now? We fly to China. We fly over there, act as trusted advisors, and take people by the hand. So as you can see on screen, we act as a trust center and take the whole process in hand. The goal is to establish a legally compliant organization in China and coordinate with the headquarters. In addition to the organizational structure, this involves designing the processes and technology. The focus is on data security, cybersecurity, and reporting. Here is an example of how this works. On the left side of the flowchart, you can see that we are in China, and on the right, that the data goes to the headquarters. The first fundamental question is what data is even allowed to leave China? We often have a cybersecurity center at our headquarters in Germany. Can we connect Chinese incidents to this headquarters system? That's not entirely straightforward due to cross-border data traffic. These days, a lot of focus is on artificial intelligence. In China, the entire economy is being upgraded through AI. AI is the key technology and the common denominator, the foundation of just about everything. German companies are naturally following suit and enhancing their services by providing AI solutions to Chinese customers. However, for security reasons, they want to keep the data in Germany. In this scenario depicted in the diagram on the screen, we face problem that the German manufacturer's Chinese customer as a user submits a request and provides input via a prompt, which is then transferred across borders to Germany. The German server accesses a Chinese AI model such as Qianwen of Alibaba in China. This system responds to the server, which then generates a final result and sends it back to the Chinese user. This means we have 4 cross-border data transfers. That doesn't make things easy. The obvious solution here, of course, is to opt for complete localization. This raises the question of how secure our data is. Is this sensitive business data? What can we store locally in China? So we cannot avoid these questions above. On the right side of the slides, you can see the legal requirements outlined once again: appointment of a representative, algorithm restriction, MLPS implementation, etc. Certification under MLPS 2.0 is essential. Chinese authorities are cracking down and inspecting companies connected to networks. This is almost always the case. Officials will want to see your MLPS certificate. So here's a quick aside. Since January 2026, we've been running a series of articles in German in the magazine Digital Business. And Digital Business is a magazine for experts on digital transformation. The series focuses on China's AI offensive. China isn't just exporting solar panels and electric vehicles. It's also exporting artificial intelligence through products, processes, tools, and platforms. DeepSeek was just the beginning. We are at the beginning of a Chinese AI offensive. We describe this in the series of articles in the form of industry profiles and operational and strategic technical articles. This also includes strategic recommendations for German companies. Chinese AI is very powerful, open source, and cost effective. Many companies work with it but are afraid to acknowledge this publicly. In the AI sector too, much will not function in the future without China. So we encounter Chinese AI products, processes, and applications not only in competition within China, but also here in Germany, in Europe, and in our third-party export markets. For example, China also exports its AI to South America, Africa, and the Belt and Road participating countries. So, can Western AI tools be used in China? Yes, as long as they do not violate national security interests or the government's regulatory requirements. In other words, Western AI software is not prohibited in principle, but under no circumstances may it be used for official audits, certification, or compliance reviews. Tools must be approved for such purposes. However, this is not a major hurdle. It is usually just an administrative formality. So we recommend that companies in China combine Chinese and Western tools. After all, we can use Western tools for verification without officially using the results. A parallel use of local and Western tools blend the best of the East and the West. Certifying cyber-critical devices and specialized cybersecurity products is a routine task in China. When deploying cyber-critical hardware in China, we generally have the choice between low-cost Chinese products and expensive certificate Western products. Many companies opt for the Western option. In this context, we would like to reiterate the importance of MLPS certification, which generally requires the replacement of the network hardware. So if you are connected to networks in China, you need this certificate in the upper right corner. Even a single computer connected to other partners, such as a customer, while a cable is considered as a network. The definition of a network in China is actually very broad. When it comes to network security, we recommend integrating Western and Chinese systems. We're not reinventing the wheel in China, but rather leveraging Chinese resources and vice versa. We have detailed EU IT compliance requirements not only in China, but also here in Europe. Both can be incorporated and aligned within companies. The systems can be reintegrated. So we take the German ASMS and adapt it for China. This also makes sense because national laws and regulations are becoming increasingly intertwined due to their extraterritorial application. Laws are converging while markets are diverging. So, as you can see on the screen now, this slide shows the structure of an ASMS according to ISO 27001. An ASMS should be standard practice, but many companies still have significant shortcomings in this area. So what do we do now? We take the ASMS that is in place at headquarters and transfers its components into China. We will examine what the protection requirements under ISO 27001 mean in China and what can be implemented there. Like, for example, are there standardized protection requirement classes or protection levels in China? Yes, the MLPS has 5 levels. The same principle applies in opposite direction. This means we can gradually link our protection system together. We have a preview to share at the end of this webinar. On July 23rd, 2026, at 10 a.m., we will be hosting a webinar in English on the topic of AI compliance in China. We are expanding our audience because our business is becoming increasingly international. We are planning a webinar for October on AI-based methods for accelerating business growth. So please feel free to send us any questions. Thank you very much for your time and attention.